So I get questions about when or how to trust your gut or trust your intuition. It is particularly funny on some level that I get asked this question because for decades I thought all emotion and effectively anything labeled intuition was completely a liability and self-deception effectively. So I focused on spreadsheets, pro and con lists, and better yet, numbers and quantifiable metrics for almost every decision that I made. And some of those decisions turned out very, very poorly. I remember one in particular where I was looking at these various contracts and different terms and clauses and strings of negotiation via email for a TV project that I was considering doing. And I agonized over this decision for many, many weeks, the decision to go or not go, to green light or to red light, to do the deal or not do the deal. After weeks of this, and I'm trying to lay out everything in the most left-brained way possible, and I know it's not actually, from a neuroscience standpoint, totally true, but you get the idea. From an analytical, quantitative perspective, the deal looked great, but I didn't feel comfortable saying yes. And at one point, my girlfriend at the time said, late one night, she goes, "Well, do you trust this guy or not?" And I said, "No, I don't." And she's like, "Well, there's your answer." And so her approach was diametrically opposed, one might think, to mine. But I've come to believe, especially in the last handful of years, that to ignore your gut feeling, and I think there is something to that phrasing, gut feeling, to ignore what you might term intuition, although that word is very often overused, is to ignore and to, in some ways, spurn millions of years of evolution, and that the prefrontal cortex, sort of executive function, spreadsheet version of human decision-making is actually very, very new, and that it is an addition to, not a replacement for, the gut feelings that we have. Let's explore that just a little bit, because many people will say, "I intuitively feel this, my intuition tells me that," and it's used as a catch-all. It is used as a default. My feeling is that intuition, feeling, etc., is best used when you have demonstrated the ability to think rationally in a structured way through problems in your life. You need both. You definitely need both, because it is easy to say, my intuition says X, when in reality, what that means is you're just afraid of doing Y, or you don't have the skills necessary to do Y, so you rationalize that as some type of otherworldly intuitive hit, and that is normally bullshit. So let's talk about how I've applied what we might term intuition in a way that I find very pragmatic. And it comes from two people who I respect greatly, Diana Chapman and Jim Detmer. And they are part of the Conscious Leadership Group. Is that right? I believe that's right. I'm looking at my fact checker, but I think I'm getting that right. The Conscious Leadership Group, CLG, which was originally introduced to me vis-a-vis their book, which I believe, again, is the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. Let's fact check that. I think we're good. Which was introduced to me by Dustin Moskovitz, co-founder of Facebook. And when Dustin recommends anything to me, I pay a lot of attention. And so that is the door through which I was introduced to them. I reached out to them when I was working on a book that I decided to cancel, not because the content wasn't really good, but because I didn't want to dedicate energy to doing a multi-year book project, a book about saying no. And I wanted to talk to Diana and Jim, but specifically Diana, a lot about a concept they use called the whole body yes. What does this mean? So if we're trying to look at the entire realm of possibilities in life, the things we can say yes to, the things we can say no to, it's very helpful to have some heuristics, some rules of thumb, some basic guidelines for what to say yes or what to say no to. What are your policies, in other words, so that you're not making a million decisions every day about what to say yes or no to. And the whole body yes is one of their frameworks I found most useful. It's very simple in some ways, but it takes some time to tune in, especially if you over-caffeinate or use a lot of booze or whatever that throws off your sort of perception baseline. you may need to cut back on those things to get a really accurate read. Whole body yes is simple. You're considering going to a coffee date with someone because they asked you out to pick your brain or whatever. You're considering doing a deal of some type. You are considering going on a trip. You get invited to speak. You are asked to do a favor from someone, whatever it is. You check in, you ask yourself, or simply pay attention to, three things. Is it a yes in your mind? In other words, sort of analytically or intellectually, is it a yes? Okay, that's a yes, no. In your gut, all right, is it a yes or is it a no? And I'm paraphrasing all of this. Diana would do a much better job, but in your gut, is it a yes or a no? All right, and then in your heart, and this is the one I have the toughest time with, but like in your heart, sort of emotionally is how I translate that for myself. Are you emotionally in or are you emotionally withdrawn, right? So is it a yes or a no in your sort of heart space, let's call it, even though it sounds very woo-woo, hand-wavy San Francisco. Love you guys, lived there for a long time. Nonetheless, if it is yes, 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 that is a whole body yes and you should do it. If it is anything less than that, if it's a no on any of those parameters, then the blanket answer is no. And this whole body yes might seem stupid or simplistic when I first describe it, but I've found it invaluable for making some really important decisions, including saying no to writing this entire book, which is a separate story I'll tell another time in greater detail. But the whole body yes is a check-in. And it also, if you, like me for many decades, are left brain dominant and really just focus on the numbers and the spreadsheets and so on, you have probably alienated yourself from a lot of feeling. There are perhaps a lot of things you don't want to feel, or a lot of things you protected yourself from, perhaps from childhood trauma, or who the fuck knows, right? Any number of things. No one gets out of childhood unscathed, as they say. And in many cases, we've developed coping mechanisms that make us very good at some type of achievement, but there are many decisions made that we wish we could undo. And one of the ways of avoiding some of those bad decisions is this whole body yes check-in. Is it yes here? Is it yes here? Is it yes here in the gut? The way that I have interpreted that and used it most frequently, because I'm not really sure what a yes in the heart means. I'm not totally clear on that. I'm also not really clear what a yes in the gut means. But I do know what a no feels like for me. Any constriction in the chest, that's a no. Any discomfort in the gut, any type of emotional recoiling or iffiness, that's a no. And another expression which I have found very helpful is when in doubt, there is no doubt. So what does that mean? It's very simple. If you're like, hell yes, kind of along the lines of Derek Sivers, one of my favorite entrepreneurs, programmers, artistes, his policy is, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And if you find yourself hemming and hawing like, oh, I don't know, oh God, I'm not sure, you are sure. That means something in your body or your mind is saying no, and therefore it's a no. All right, and yes, you have to do your fucking taxes, okay? You gotta pick your kids up from school. There are things that may not bring unbridled joy to your brain, heart, and gut that you have to take care of. So don't be irresponsible, don't be totally ridiculous about it. But for a lot of decisions, this can make the difference in leaning yes or no. Is it a whole body yes? Is it a yes here? Is it a yes in the heart? Is it a yes in the gut? Anything less, and it is a no. So there you have it. That is where I am currently with thinking about a lot of intuition and gut reading and so on. There are more tools in the toolkit, but that is one that I found particularly useful.